Resident Evil 4 is one of the most important games ever made. From its revolutionary gameplay style that was imitated for years to come, to its cheesy but serious enough plot that was written in a way to keep players, both new and old, invested all the way through. And one aspect of Resident Evil 4 that really helped it was its great cast of characters littered throughout the whole game who all had at least one quotable bit of dialogue, be it the returning vets like Leon S. Kennedy or newer characters like Jack Krauser. But one of the major characters that stands out from the rest of the cast due to his style and charm, along with being Leon's only true ally on his mission besides Hunnigan, the psychic Spaniard scientist specializing in seduction, Luis Sera. Luis Sera is one of the few people who supports Leon during his mission in Resident Evil 4, along with being one of the two that actually works with Leon face to face. And while he doesn't matter in the long term of the series, he is a major reason for why the plot gets as out of hand as it does in RE4, given his connection to Los Illuminados and Las Plagas. Though before we get too deeply into that, we should discuss the meaning behind his name and design. Now starting first, design-wise, Luis Sera is an instant standout among the rest of the Ganados in Resident Evil 4, and this is due to the mixture of old-fashioned and New World influences on said design. Starting first with his outfit, which is much more stylish and expensive looking than the everyday farmer in the village, giving us the impression that he is someone of either wealth or high standing in this country. But its overall color scheme connects us to the village itself, given that it matches up with all the colors that we've seen so far, which in turn matches well with Luis's own relation to the village itself character-wise. Along with this, his vest, large belt buckle, and boots give us the impression of a gunslinger or cowboy, which might be in reference to the concept of old cheesy spaghetti western movies which helped elevate western films as a whole, especially series like the Dollar Trilogy, and Resident Evil 4 is a game that really revels in its tropiness, so a slight reference to spaghetti westerns might be right on the money. And this possible connection to gunslingers is somewhat reinforced by the fact that Luis is actually a very good gunsman, even twirling his gun before a shootout, which is weird for his character given that he's actually a scientist by trade. But instead of using a revolver like most cowboys, and instead, much like his character design, his weapon of choice is a mix of both modern and old-fashioned. This being the Red 9, which is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful handgun in the game if you invest into it correctly. The Red 9 actually gets its name from a special production line of Mauser C96s, which were commissioned by the German military during World War I. It had a large 9 engraved onto it so that people could tell to use 9mm rounds instead of the standard 7.63mm, given that 9mm hadn't become the standard that it is today. Though counterfeit versions of the Red 9 Mauser were created and distributed within countries like Spain and Italy, which might play into how Luis and the merchant got their hands on weapons like this, given that the gun is roughly over 90 years old. Though if you want to learn more about the Red 9 itself and other guns in the series, I actually recommend checking out a channel called Kendo's Gun Shop. He makes some of the best, if not the best, Resident Evil content on YouTube, and I used some of the information I got from his Red 9 video to help me make this video itself. The one thing about Luis's character design that's actually changed from his original conceptual stage to its final release is that during the beta release of Resident Evil 4, Luis was sporting a mustache, which was likely removed from his overall design due to mustaches in Japan being considered somewhat of an untrustworthy physical trait. And Luis as a character is supposed to be one of the only trustworthy faces in the game that the player can actually connect to, though the bottle cap for Luis actually retains this mustache design from the original model. So with the character design understood, let's move on to the name. Luis Sera is a name that works well both with the setting of Resident Evil 4, but also Luis's role in the story itself. Starting first with the Luis portion of the name, which can mean warrior or famous warrior, and given Luis's role as the only partner in the game that Leon actively fights side by side with and face to face, it makes sense that he was given this name. And then of course you have his last name Sera, which is a plural for serum, which is a liquid used for medical purposes, especially when confronting viral infections. So altogether, Luis Sera's name can mean famous warrior of the many serums, which makes a lot of sense given Sera, before the events of the game, was a scientist with a doctorate in biology, and in turn, due to his connection to the village that this game takes place in, he got roped into helping make Las Plagas a more powerful and dangerous parasite than it was before. Though you might be a little confused, because Luis introduces himself as a former cop from Madrid.
Me llamo Luis Sera. I used to be a cop in Madrid.
though throughout this video I've been saying that he's a scientist. This is because the Cop from Madrid story is likely a cover for his actual identity, but let's discuss that more as we discuss his total history. Luis Sera, as a young boy, grew up in the village that the game takes place in. This is long before it fell to the grasp of the cult, but it was a largely boring village, void of technological advancements, and was the equivalent of Amish country. So in his youth, Luis would frequently hunt with his grandfather for food, and this gave Luis a greater understanding of the land around him so that he knew all the secret passageways, so that he could move around the area without getting caught. Though soon he would grow bored with his life in the village, and once he reached maturity, he left to pursue a career that would help him make a name for himself in the modern world. It is here that he went to college and obtained a doctorate in biology. Then one day, when he returned home to his village, he found that it was now under the control of the Los Illuminados, a cult which worshipped an ancient parasite which had been revived with intention to use as a biological weapon by Osmond Sadler. Luis was contracted and forced into working on the parasite, and to assure that he would work hard, they injected him with Las Plagas. Under their orders, Luis helped them create many different monstrous mutations, such as the Dr. Salvadors, which are normal people with super enhanced strength, or the El Gigantes, and probably the most horrific, the Regenerators. And while these were human experiments, Luis likely found himself fascinated by the parasite itself, given his profession and his understanding of biology, as not only did this ancient parasite survive its fossilization through tiny spores created in a low oxygen environment, but there were multiple species of them which communicated almost psychically, which might be why Luis makes the joke about psychic powers when confronted by Leon about Ashley. Though Luis's main task when researching Las Plagas was to find a way to make them harder to be removed from the body, and while working on this, Luis was actually working on a secret side project that would end up doing the exact reverse. And in this research, Luis discovered that the parasites themselves were weak to a specific kind of radiation, which killed them almost instantly. The only issue is that the process was extremely painful. And likely soon after Luis removed his own parasite, he must have caught wind of Sadler's plan of world domination through Las Plagas, along with his plan to kidnap the president's daughter. When these plans were made apparent to him, he decided to act. Luis contacted the organization, a secret bioweapons sales and distribution company which was headed by Albert Wesker at the time. Luis promised them a sample of the dominant Las Plagas parasite, and the reason they would want this is because the dominant Las Plagas can control the minor Las Plagas. He did this all as long as they could guarantee his safety, and they would take out Sadler and free his village. Wesker then deployed Ada Wong to the area to make contact with Luis and retrieve the sample, a sample which Luis stole directly from his lab alongside these pills that he developed that slowed the growth of Las Plagas within the body. Luis then likely escaped using some of the secret passageways his grandfather taught him as a kid, though he reached about as far as the village before he was stopped by Boris Mendez, the village elder and Big Cheese. Mendez, having to divulge resources from Luis, ended up placing him within a cabinet deep within the woods of the village. This cabinet was protected by 2 explosive tripwires and a locked door, so he wasn't expecting anyone to burst through them and find Luis himself. And the reason that he had to divulge forces is because there is a new threat that had just entered the village itself, this being Leon S. Kennedy, an agent sent by America to retrieve Ashley, aka the president's daughter. Leon not only managed to infiltrate the village, but he also made it all the way to Luis, freeing him from his cabinet. But they were soon stopped again by Mendez, who, under order of Sadler, had them re-injected with Las Plagas and bound them together, not killing them because Sadler wanted to use Leon or Luis to lure out the third party that he thought was working with one of the two, and he turned out to be 100% correct on this assumption. Which is where we reach the two actually getting to know each other, and Luis tells Leon that he used to be a cop from Madrid. Now this story, along with the following statement about being a hero is tough work, is a great example of Luis manipulating someone through deception as to gain their trust, as Luis only mentions Madrid and the story about being an ex-cop after Leon himself implies that he might be a police officer as well.
What, are you supposed to be a cop or something? Nah, you don't look the type.
Maybe. And who might you be?
Me llamo Luis Sera. I used to be a cop in Madrid. But now I'm just a good-for-nothing guy who happens to be quite a ladies' man.
So, Luis fabricates a story that would help gain the trust of Leon, while also leaving him a clever cover story. We actually notice a similar case of Luis avoiding the truth when Ashley asks him for his name, and through his own method, he avoids answering the question directly.
How rude! And I don't believe there's any relevance with my figure and my standing. Who are you?
Oh, excuse me, Your Highness. Perhaps the young lady might want to introduce herself first before asking someone his name.
Her name's Ashley Graham, the president's daughter.
Is she...
Well, you know.
Don't worry. She's cool.
Never mind.
Though as time goes on, and he feels more and more responsible for the whole mess of an issue taking place in his hometown, Luis decides to be a hero instead of a coward. And he does this by unnecessarily putting himself into danger when he goes to retrieve the dominant Las Plagas sample. As alongside the sample, he also decides to grab the Plagas suppressing agent for Leon and Ashley, when he likely could have just left with Ada when he wanted to, as Ada would have just extracted him as soon as he provided her the dominant sample, which seems to be a thought that had crossed his mind at some point, given how he reacts when Ashley offers to go with him to go get the suppressing agent.
Let me come with you.
No, you stay here with Leon. He is better with the ladies, I'm sure.
Why are you...
It makes me feel better.
Luis recognizing Leon as the more heroic of the two. Though, in his attempt to be a hero, Luis pays the ultimate price. When he encountered Leon for the second time within the castle, he is killed from behind from the man that he decided to betray for the better sake of the world, this being Sadler, who in turn not only robbed Luis of his escape out of this village in this situation, but his life as well. And though now that we've mentioned his death, did you know that Luis actually has an unused death animation? It's technically impossible to trigger by any normal means within the game, but the channel, Horoscope, uncovered that if you stack enough instant kill damage on Luis during the cabin fight, you can trigger a somewhat sloppy but still functioning death animation for Luis as he falls limply to the ground. I thought this was really interesting and I wanted to point it out, so if you guys want to go check out that video, I heavily recommend it. Back to plot stuff, in Luis's final moment, he gives Leon the suppressing agent and informs him of his actual history with Sadler, opening up truly to Leon for the first time in the entire game, as it is here that he fully feels like he can trust Leon with the fate of not only his home village, but the world. Though this wasn't Luis's final gift to Leon and Ashley, as during the endgame, the two stumble upon a machine within the labs of the island complex, and it's this machine that ultimately utilizes the beams of special radiation that he discovered that killed the Plagas instantly, allowing Luis to cure them of the disease that, by proxy, he infected them with. Luis Sera's story is possibly one of the most interesting ones in Resident Evil 4, as it's one about a cowardly man who, through his interactions with those who are braver than him, decides to act up like the hero he pretended to be and actually seek redemption for his past actions. Though tragically, his act of heroics causes him to suffer an ultimate loss in an attempt to keep the world safe. And because of this story, Luis is still one of the coolest characters in the series, and I wish that he got any sort of service outside of Resident Evil 4 as a whole. Maybe sort of a spin-off little game that shows his perspective during the events of Resident Evil 4, showing him going through those secret exits. I mean, there's a lot of scenes where he just kind of shows up at places that we've previously traveled through. Or even maybe a potential full prequel game in the form of an undercover outbreak of the T-virus, since Luis does mention...
That is the incident with the viral outbreak, right? I think I might have seen a sample of the virus in a lab at the department.
But given how long it's been since Resident Evil 4 was released, I doubt we'll see anything about Luis. Unless, well, there were some rumors a while back about Resident Evil 4 might be getting a remake of some sort, assumedly on par with the remakes that we've been seeing for the past two games. And maybe, in this RE4 remake, it might include some extra content which covers Luis in more depth. Or hell, we might even get a whole side campaign where we get to play as him a bit, much like Assignment Ada or Separate Ways. And if that happens, I'd happily remake this video with any new information that we receive on Luis. And with that all said and done, I hope you enjoyed this video. Resident Evil is a series that I've been a long-time fan of, and a series that is extremely close to my heart. And I hope to cover more characters in the future, given how much I enjoy it. But I wanted to start with someone simple who meant a lot to me as a character. I think Luis is one of the coolest characters in the series, honestly, and I thought it would be cool to cover him, given that I don't see a lot of coverage of Resident Evil characters in this fashion. So, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more videos like in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/MediNotTheBadGuy. It really helps support the channel if you pledge a little bit of money there. And if you want to prevent the spread of an ancient evil parasite, you can do so by watching Shimonetta, a boring world where the concept of dirty jokes doesn't exist at byshimonetta.com.